Hi guys, I wanted to go over our notes for today. We're going to begin solving probability. And so probability is basically just the likelihood that something is going to happen. And that ranges from 0, meaning it can never happen, to 1, meaning it will always happen. And so we talked about the different scenarios today and what that might look like. So if probability of 0, that means it's impossible. So there's basically like a scale here. And then the next marker is like close to 0, but it could still possibly happen. That term is called unlikely. And then because it's right in the middle, this term is called equally likely. And then it just gradually increases to the next one would be likely. And then if it's always going to happen, instead of saying possible, because possible is a possibility that it could happen or it could not, we use the word certain. It will happen every time. So that's a scale from 0, meaning it will never happen, to 1 or 100%, meaning it will happen every time. So what you'll do is you'll go through and look at these questions, and you want to determine what's the likelihood of something happening. So when flipping a fair coin, it will land on heads. That's 50% of the time it'll land on that, so it's equally likely. Number 2, George Washington, the first president, will visit our school. Well, he's passed away, so that's impossible. And then when rolling a number cube, a number less than 7, well, 1 through 6 are always less than 7, so that's a certain. And I'll let you answer those other ones. Moving on to this next slide, probability is typically almost always written as a fraction, and it's the number of favorable outcomes. And that means what I want to happen, favorable, and outcomes means the what could happen over the total number of outcomes. So if I use that 6-sided die as a scenario, I want a 1 to roll, and I have 1 is what I want, so that would be the number on top. 6 is what how many can happen, so it would be 1 out of 6. So we write that as a probability on the event in the parentheses of what we want to happen. So what is the probability of heads on a coin? Well, there's 1 head, and there are 2 sides, so it's 1 out of 2. The next one is talking about a deck of cards. This is a little bit of an issue if you don't know how many cards there are in a deck. There are 52 cards in a deck. There are 13 in a suit, meaning there are 13 diamonds, 13 hearts, 13 clubs, and 13 spades. So not red, if we just think about what that means, is I know half of the deck is red, and I know half of the deck is black. So there are 26 out of 52, but I know that that's also equal to 1/2. So the word mathematics is here, and it says there are 11 letters, and I want to know what's the probability of drawing out an M. Well, in the word mathematics, there are 2 M's, and I counted how many letters are in that word. It's out of 11. Vowels, there are 1, 2, 3, 4 vowels. And again, there are 11 letters. And then last one is what's the probability of not getting an H or a T? There are 8 letters that are not H or T, so it's 8 out of 11. Oops. So that is our notes for today. The next slide, you're going to also do the same thing where you match up which one of these answers matches. So the only issue is I want to point out is when you're looking at this one, like not green, there are 8 of them that are not green, which would be an 8 out of 10. You should notice that there are no 8 out of 10s because we can simplify fractions. So we're going to drag the 4/5 to the not green. And so that's your notes for today. I go over this in class, and then honestly, I think I'm going to go over quite a bit of the assignment in class today too, because some people are really struggling with changing a fraction to a decimal, which is a review concept that we need to go over. So starting with number 1 on the slide, this is under your assignments, by the way, you're going to tell the probability as a fraction. You're going to convert that to a decimal, and then you're going to convert it to a percentage. Decimals to percents are honestly the easiest because you just move a decimal point. It's the fraction to a decimal that kind of gives people a hiccup. So a fraction, flipping heads, there's one head on a quarter, and there are two outcomes available, heads or tails. So it's 1 out of 2. I talked this one pretty quickly through. With a 1/2 as a fraction, I think about money, and I know that decimals are out of tenths or hundreds, and so is money. And so with pennies, there are 100 pennies in a dollar. So if I have half of them, that's 50 cents. So the answer is 0.5 or 0.50 if you needed to kind of use it as a reference. And so to change a decimal to a percentage, we move our decimal point 2 units to the right. So my percentage is 50%. We're going to do that again here. What is the probability of rolling a 2? There is only one 2 on a 6-sided die, and it's out of 6. So using that scale from before in our notes, is that going to be likely or unlikely? And I've got the scale on slide 3 if you want to reference that. 1/6 is pretty low, so it's going to be unlikely. So you're going to put that there. And then last but not least, we're going to do these. It says a spinner has 10 equally sized sections. So that means there are 10 sections and they're labeled 1 through 10. And I want to know what's the probability of spinning a 5. Well, 1 through 10, there's only one 5 there. So it's 1 out of 10. This one is actually pretty easy to change to a decimal. 1/10, if you remember, is the first tenths is that number. So if there's 1/10, it's 0.1. And to make that a decimal, we move our decimal point 2 places to the right, and that's 10%. And so that is an unlikely term because it's pretty small. And I need to graph that on the number line. And from 0 to 1, I'm going to go ahead and double check this. I have 10 20ths, 20 tenths, or 3 tenths, 4 tenths, 5 tenths, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 tenths. So 1 out of 10 is going to be right here. So I want you to try to finish the rest of these doing that same thing I just did on this slide. If you need help or don't understand how to do that, mainly though, you can always take a fraction and do top divided by bottom to get your decimal point. But some of these you kind of already know.